The object today is a 1959 Volkswagen Beetle. I'm not going to drive it, but I'm going to sit in it. It's kind of fun to sort of be in here. I had a 68 Volkswagen when I was a kid. So it might appear that this 1959 Volkswagen Beetle doesn't need very much,
because it looks like it's in pretty good condition. But in fact, on closer inspection, we needed to do quite a lot of restoration on this car.
MoMA started showing automobiles in 1951, and cars have been in the collection since 1972.
The New York Times actually wrote an article kind of criticizing why the museum would have an automobile in the collection. You know, the automobile is a design object. It's an object of our lifetime. Initially, when we decided to do this restoration, it was really just about the paint. And then after we were in contact with Automotive Restorations, we realized there were a lot more problems with the car. There was some iron oxide corrosion or rust on the inside of the bumpers. Other little things that I noticed that I'm not sure is correct is this two-tone color that you're seeing between the sort of body of the car. This particular green is slightly different. The color of the car is called mignonette green. To me, it's very typical of the 1950s. Of these subdued greens. Something that I learned in my research was that the color mignonette green is a true result of the Germans trying to make it brighter and different from what automobile colors were from the past. It's interesting because this is a perfect example of a composite object that we find in the institution where there's so many different types of materials on one object. And this is when the job gets really difficult, when you've got, you know, rubber and glass and paint and metals that are chromed, textile, leather. This is why you need a specialist person to work on an object like this.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, essentially, we want to know if there's any issues with the car before we take it apart, because when we're putting the car back together again, like here, the passenger side door is not happy. The hinges are a little worn, it doesn't shut well, the latch doesn't operate very well. So we want to know that that's a problem going into this, so that when we're putting it all back together, that we're not chasing a problem that we could have solved when we were taking it apart. Here, the windshield's cracked.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's cracked right here. So you run into the problem of, this is an original West German produced windshield.
Okay.
So now we run into the choice. Do we try to source, is there a source for an original, you know, Seguridad, you know, West German produced original 1957 VW windshield? Because there's no way that we're gonna be able to take this windshield out and put it back in without worsening that crack.
Is that right?
There's
Okay.
there's just a physical impossibility.
From simple terms for car restoration, as it rolled off the factory line, you wanted to bring it back to that level. So you want details down to the correct nuts and bolts and the trim work. Everything should be as it was when it was made, as close as we possibly can get it. There's a lot of bubbling of paint throughout the whole entire surface of the car. And sort of an analogy would be, it's almost like the blistering mimics like a rash, and if you don't take care of it, the rash would continue to grow and eventually those bubbles would burst and you would see the corrosion. So that's why we're really restoring this, and we're gonna have to take this down to the bare metal. Otherwise, in the future, you know, this would just continuously get worse and worse and worse. The history of the Volkswagen Beetle really starts with Ferdinand Porsche. Ferdinand Porsche was an automobile designer. He wanted to come up with a people's car, which is what Volkswagen actually means. He ended up being contacted by Adolf Hitler because Hitler also wanted to bring the automobile up to the same standard that was happening around the world, especially in the United States. But this was a failed project, partly due to production problems, but also due to the Third Reich. All the energy went into that war effort, and the car was co-opted for the war as opposed to for the people.
In 1959, the giant is shaken. 700,000 Americans buy foreign cars in this 1 year.
The success of the Volkswagen really doesn't come until after the Second World War, partly due to the German rebuilding. The Volkswagen then became the middle-class car, and beloved as well. And so it really was in the 1950s, by mid-1950s, the Volkswagen was not only very popular within Germany, but was being exported outside of Germany. And by 1958, they had export license to be able to export this automobile all over the world. A car that was functional, affordable. Up until the mid-1960s, the Volkswagen Beetle was the #1 car in the United States. It was, millions were shipped from Germany. It's been 3 weeks since we were here last at Automotive Restorations. We're now in the body shop. As you can see, the Volkswagen now has been stripped down basically to the shell of the body. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be stripping down the paint, grinding it down with some pneumatic grinders down to the bare metal. And this is just to remove all the paint that's from, as we mentioned before, all the imperfections of the paint that's bubbled on the surface. We did a small test just to break through them down to the bare metal. So you're seeing the primer coat is the gray, the green is obviously the top coat, and then the bare metal and corrosion can be seen in the center of this area. All right.
See, this is a large amount of body filler on the front of the hood there.
Okay.
So you can see you have paint, primer, another kind of primer, another kind of primer, some green stuff, which might be another paint job.
Okay.
This is many, many layers of body filler.
Okay, so there's a big dent there.
And then, yeah, there's some sort of damage there.
Okay.
You can see once you sand it, you can start seeing the different layers down to the
Sure.
metal. And the metal actually has rust everywhere on it once you get down to it. You can see like a little brown layer
see
on
it.
it. Yeah. Yeah, you don't stay clean when you come to a body shop.
That's okay, I don't care. We don't stay clean in my job either.
This green layer right here sanded smoother as far as the transition goes, where over here it ripped off the base metal. So different areas of the car have different levels of adhesion. Some are good, some are bad. We're not really trying to change anything, we're just kind of smoothing out the texture from the sandblaster. And then once all the exterior's sanded with 80 grit, then we'll get epoxy primer on everything.
So these have been taken down to the bare metal, and they've been sent to the sandblaster, and they have epoxy coating.
Right. This came right back from the sandblaster. We sanded the exterior of it.
It's interesting because you see the kind of history of this object when you strip it all down. So this will get painted completely today.
Right.
Wow, okay.
We started with epoxy. We epoxied the whole car, and then we did all the body work to straighten all the panels back together, back to the straight as they could be. And then we put another primer over it, and then we blocked that primer to smooth it out even further.
And that's to get rid of all the dents? And
All the dents and all the body work that you saw that we removed, we straightened the panel as best we could, and then we reapplied filler to straighten it.
How many coats of the final coat go in?
We'll probably do 4 coats of base, and then 3 coats of
coat?
clear.
Okay. 3 coats of clear, wow.
Yeah.
So it's 7 coats of paint, wow. Now you see that the automobile parts are white, or the vehicle is white. Well, that's because a new primer coat had to be added.
It's cold, it needs a lot of coats.
When we went to Connecticut to see the repainting and part of the assembly of the car, that was a really exciting day because we knew that we were like only one step away from the full reassembly. However, this was March 12th of 2020. And on our way back from the Automotive Restorations in Connecticut, we had heard on the radio that museums and places were closing down and shutting down, and we were wondering what was going to be next for us. We also did the same thing. We closed our doors. And little did we know that this was going to continue for so long, this pandemic. I actually thought, oh, this is a couple months or something, but here we are, a year later. So we actually didn't get to see the finished piece until it actually arrived back to MoMA. Get going. Yeah. Show on the road.
You know what I mean? The word on a sinking heart. The girl of my dreams. Everybody loves those.
At the end of the day, they had to replace the windshield, which was cracked, and they couldn't really remove it safely. It was going to break anyway, so we put in a replacement. And I think we have to accept some of those parts of the automobile as not original, but then once it's replaced, it becomes part of the history of that object. They repainted the car, cleaned up the bumpers, so they removed the corrosion. I think they did some re-chroming on the bumpers. They did some just adjustments to the doors, adjustments so that things function properly. I mean, everything about this car is really in the best condition. And this car's, had been around for 60 odd years or so, maybe longer. And I realized that this had a history, just like anything else. Somebody drove this car, somebody crashed this car. It had dents in the fenders, it had dents in the doors, even the roof. I think this car actually rolled at some point because there was a lot of damage on the roof. Now all of that gets buried under the restoration because they fill it and sand it and they get the contour back. But that was probably the biggest surprising thing, is the history that this object had gone through.
Well, I finished my work on a Friday night in my blue suede shoes.
And that's what makes the automobile kind of special that way. I mean, why wouldn't we have automobiles in our design collection? For our generation, at least for the last 100 and some years, has controlled the way we live today, if you think about it.
The girl of my dreams. Everybody loves those movies. Everybody loves those.